All right, so in this video, I'm going to be talking about transpersonal psychology and how that has personally transformed my understanding of suffering, my understanding of the experiences I've had here, and how it's really freed me to enact the will of my higher self, to not get bogged down in a lot of these circumstances in life that can lead to despair, depression, all of these types of heavy and dense emotions. And this message is really for anyone who is dealing with or has dealt with a lot of difficult life circumstances that have led to very deep despair. And for you, it hasn't mattered how much therapy you do or how much inner work you do. It's like these issues just keep coming up again, again, and again. And this is something I can 100% relate to because that was my experience. And what really helped me was understanding my experience within the bigger context of our lives as souls. I think it's kind of silly to ignore this huge facet of who we are. I mean, at our core, we are light, we are spiritual beings, and we are trying to treat a lot of these issues in our life as if we are not, as if none of that matters. And of course, we're going to have all of these intense feelings of suffering come up throughout our experience here, but we're not going to have the understanding to deal with them if we don't even understand the bigger picture of what we're doing here, right? And so for me, I really dealt with a lot of circumstances in my life that really made me give up on life, to be honest. I went through many phases where I felt like life was not worth living, that my life was pointless, it was all a waste. And this really was heightened when I first was diagnosed with mast cell activation syndrome. And this kind of happened after mold exposure and a surgery I had had. And, everything just spiraled from there. And for those that don't know much about mast cell activation syndrome, it's essentially a disorder in which your mast cells, which are part of your immune system, are hypersensitive. They become overactive to everything to the point that you are essentially at risk. Your life is at risk all of the time from anaphylactic reactions. But it's not even just about the anaphylactic reactions. You have systemic symptoms because mast cells are in pretty much every single system in your body. And so it's going to affect pretty much every area of your health. And so, I went from living a generally normal life, I always had different things going on, but, a generally normal life that I could cope with, to all of a sudden having to go on a medical leave from school, to not being able to leave my house, to being restricted to like 10 foods and under, to being suddenly allergic to fragrances, to, beauty products, to all the little things people don't think about that make pretty much going out in public impossible. Smoke, gas from cars, pollen. It really felt like I was living in this bubble that just existed within my room with me and my air purifier. And I was like, what is the purpose of an existence like this? What is the purpose of an existence where I am just sitting in my room doing nothing and I'm not able to engage with life? And so, as you can imagine, being in those kinds of those kind of circumstances, it can really make you question everything. And there can be a lot of grief that comes up, of course, because you're grieving this life that you thought you should have had. We have these cultural expectations from a young age where it's like, you go to college, you get this job, you travel, you get married, you have kids, you have all of these fun experiences with your friends, you go out places. And all of a sudden, I felt like the future that I had planned for myself was just completely wiped away. It was just completely gone. And I had to really connect in with my superconscious mind, with my higher self, to understand that just because um, just because I was not able to live the life I thought I should have had, it doesn't mean that this isn't the life I should have had. And I'm just going to rephrase that again so that makes more sense. Um, you know, when I was able to look at my soul contracts and understand, what I came here to do, I realized that that life I thought I should have had was never the life I was going to have. The life I have now was always the life that I had contracted to experience. And I really was only able to ever know that by getting in connection with my soul, with understanding my life in the grand scheme of all of this, right? And I think that this is why suffering um, can really trigger spiritual awakening in a lot of people. I mean, always was very spiritually aware, but it was these experiences that catapulted me exponentially further than I ever thought I could be on this spiritual path. And so, I often think there is probably another version of me out there in a parallel timeline where I am infinitely happier and I got to have all of these amazing experiences, right? But she would be far less developed, far less wiser than I am today. She would be stagnant in her spiritual growth. And what is it that we even come here to do as souls, as humans? We come here to grow, we come here to evolve. And so, in a weird way, all of the suffering I went through, I started to become grateful for because I understood its purpose. And this is something that's really key, I think, for the human psyche is that suffering, any kind of suffering for most of us can become bearable if we understand why it's happening. Suffering is only unbearable when we can't make sense of it, when it feels random, it feels chaotic, it feels like, why is this happening to me? Like, this is like, why me, and we start comparing our lives and the way we're living to other people. And, we're not going to get far by doing that because guess what? Like, this life is one life in a blip of thousands. How am I going to compare my experiences in this life to someone else when I understand the grand scheme of my soul and I understand that this is just one life in, thousands, right? Um, and so I started to understand my purpose. I started to understand what I came here to experience. I started to really integrate and embody more of my higher self. And this doesn't mean that I didn't suffer anymore. I think that for a lot of people, they use spirituality as a method of escapism. They use it to kind of distract themselves or as a form of entertainment or as a way of wishful thinking, And it wasn't like that for me. I think that when it comes to suffering, it's still something that we experience, even when we have the knowledge of our soul contracts. I think we wouldn't be human if we didn't experience suffering, if we didn't have a developed emotional body, right? That's just par for the course when we're living in a density like this. But it makes it so that we are able to have the strength, have the will, have the purpose that allows us to really get through any difficult situation. It gives us the inner peace, the knowing and the understanding that this is what we came here to do. So, you know, true freedom does not come from avoiding pain. It does not come from seeking happiness, because at the end of the day, emotions are simply transient states, right? So if you are trying to find a sense of permanence in something like happiness, which is a temporary emotion, you are just going to be disappointed and you're going to end up seeking out distractions and just trying to numb yourself when you can't maintain that state. And true freedom really comes not from seeking out these states, but from submitting to the will of our higher selves, from understanding what it is to be fully embodied as your higher self, to be in constant connection with that super conscious mind, with that cosmic mind that exists within every single one of us. And this gives us, the the inner peace to really deal with whatever comes our way. And yeah, I also think that in general, even when it comes to maybe there's not anything in particular you're dealing with in your life, but you're just feeling a general sense of dissatisfaction. I think honestly, with everything going on in the world and with the density we're living in, it would be strange not to, right? If you are building your emotional body, you are going to be very sensitive to the suffering that exists here on this planet. You are going to feel such expansive compassion that at some moments it's going to feel like your entire being is being crushed, right? Like you feel the weight and the heaviness of the whole world on you. And, you know, I always say that, tears that are released from compassion are such healing, such potent tears, because even though they're in response to suffering, it shows the beauty of who we are deep down on a soul level of who we are in our organic state as humans. um, and this is often what we see with Kuan Yin, who is seen as the goddess of mercy, and even, Mother Mary, the Virgin Mary. There are many stories of her statues, literally having tears come down from her statues. And so we see, even with the Divine Mother, even with this divine feminine presence, you know, she is weeping for her children. She is feeling such compassion for the pain of her children. And, you know, I just think it's normal. I think that when we try to live in a blissed out state all of the time, we are just floating up out of our body. We're not living our experience here. We're not transmuting anything. Um, and so really none of this is about avoiding suffering, because we can't. It is inevitable that all of us are going to feel states that don't feel the best at times. But honestly, even with that, there is a sense of unshakable inner peace that comes from knowing who you really are, what you came here to do, and the strength and the growth that can come from the lessons you're learning, the exponential growth. And so, you know, I also think that if we ignore these emotions, we are kind of turning a blind eye to our intuition that is telling us that something is very wrong on a collective level with our society. We are living so far away from what is natural for, for us as human beings, so far away. And it would be strange, like I've said, many times now, to be completely happy when we are living in such a synthetic state, when we are living so disconnected from each other, from the earth, from nature. And when we are being governed by forces that are, that not only do not have our best interest in mind, but that are actively intent upon destroying the natural evolution of our spirit. So, you know, I think, kind of circling back to the main point here, a lot of therapy nowadays, and a lot of the inner work that we do is not going to address this very crucial piece. And this crucial piece is understanding our soul contracts. And once again, just because we understand why we're experiencing something and we have that peace about it, it doesn't mean that we're immune to needing community, to needing compassion, to needing connection, to needing understanding. We're all here to love and support each other. And, as cheesy as it sounds, like, we're really here to kind of hold each other's hands through these experiences and grow together. And, not bliss out, not just distract ourselves, not just leave our body, not just be like, yeah, everything's great when things are crashing around us. A lot of these emotions that we're feeling are deeply holy emotions that remind us of who we truly are. When you feel that deep compassion in your hearts, there is a beauty in that. There is a beauty that comes from that. Just like the cosmos moves in ascent and descent cycles, we too in our own lives are constantly in a much more rapid way, moving through these cycles, right? And it's very important when we move into these descents in our life that we hold on to the understanding of why it is that we are descending. Because if we are not consciously aware of why we are descending, we are not consciously descending, we are falling, we are forgetting. We are losing ourselves in ignorance, in our lack of remembrance of who we really are. And if we can maintain that consciousness, if we can maintain that connection to the cosmos, to our inner cosmos, it makes the descent so much more initiating for us, so that when we move into our ascent again, our ascent, um, the growth is just so much more exponential. And, I think on this same topic, while we're talking about understanding spirituality and how that can play into our emotions and our mental health and all of this, we also have to consider transits, astrological transits. And I'm not even just talking about more global transits that everyone experiences, but also understanding intimately your own chart, and you're not becoming obsessive with it, but just having a general sense, of what's going on, these shifts that we're moving through. Because, I think it's so funny. Even in one of my own individual transits, I had no idea it was coming up. And I wrote a journal entry the exact day that it started, where I was like, I feel like this and this, like I feel like I just entered into this new space, and I wrote down this whole paragraph of what it is I was feeling. And then I got a notification from an astrology app. It was the pattern, and pretty much word for word, it had said that I just started a new transit that day with everything that I had just explained. So I think that a lot of us are feeling these things a lot of the time, and we're just like, oh, it just must be me, like it must be random, these things are coming from nowhere, when really they are initiations, when really they are astrological shifts affecting us. And if we can remain conscious through those, it makes it a lot easier to get through it. So yeah, these are just my thoughts on the importance of transpersonal psychology, which is really the psychology of the soul. It includes the soul. It's very holistic, especially as we move forward.